Hello and a warm Collisions YYC. Welcome to my guest this morning, Mr. Jeff Davison. How you doing, Jeff?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good, man. Thanks for coming on. Calgary Conspires. You and I have bumped into each other many times, but we've never sat down. And some recent events and a recent announcement in your court has triggered that this was a good time for you and I to have a chat. So we were joking off air of like, how do I introduce you? And I'm going to start off with CEO with the Calgary Prostate Cancer Center, followed quickly by Calgary mayoral candidate 2025, and I'll turn it back over to you to maybe give a little color to that and put some shade on that for us.
Well, I'm a former city councillor, right? I spent my time as the Ward 6 councillor from 2017 to 2021, and have had a background in energy and technology and film and all sorts of things. And you look at the table right now and you think, why is Calgary having so many problems? And to me, it's this real lack of experience, leadership, and vision. And all of those things, when I think about this introduction of who is Jeff, that's why I'm here.
Lack of leadership. I never know where these are going to go, but it's so I get stimulated or triggered by these. 2017 to 2021, you said Ward 6, just to confirm?
Yeah.
Again, I appreciate you have a diverse background and I look at things through a business lens. So that really resonates with me, that kind of comment you said around leadership and experience in the business. What makes what is that makeup that makes someone who was a representative for Ward 6 for 2017 to 2021? Because it's such a mixed bag when you look at different candidates, and myself as a voter and as a concerned and engaged and citizen who's all in on the city of ours. What do I need to look at? For yourself, being from the private sector, then working, kind of at the municipal level, then back to the private sector, non-for-profit. That's a real mixed bag of skills. Is there some universals that you really look to say, these are some of the building blocks of what makes up a candidate that, you want to represent our city? Mm-hmm.
Look, everybody's going to run because they think they have the best plan or something different that they want to move forward with, or some kind of agenda. So, I don't discount that anybody who runs for politics is there to say, I want to make a difference. And so you have to kind of have that starting ground. I think for me, I look at Calgary, I'm born and raised here, which I don't think gives me any special privilege by any means. But the city has become a place that I don't recognize anymore. And I'm not convinced that's for good, right? To me, I look at the city and I want an affordable, safe place of opportunity for everybody. And I think we've gotten away from that messaging. And so when you think about what makes a good politician, what makes a good civic leader, you look at experience and you say, look, I don't need a party to run on, because what I'm really good at, spent my career doing, is, finding cool things to do that we want to get done, bringing people together, find that common ground and move it forward, right? The merit of the project is why we're here. Because I think when you think about it, potholes and, water running and, parks, they don't care if you're blue or red or orange, right?
They are bipartisan.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, to me, it's like you need people who can park the ideology for a minute, and let's put Calgarians first. Let's put cool things that we want to be doing in our city first, and let's build a city that we want to be a part of, right? I mean, that's why we're all here, right? To make people successful, to see people succeed each and every day, to enable their success. That's what Calgary's all about.
That's interesting. I really like what you said about park the ideology, and obviously you look at some other bigger cities across Canada, and the ideology and the mayor's office seem to run pretty hand in hand. I'm obviously pointing to Ontario right now and Toronto primarily. Yeah. But you're right. How tricky is that in today's politics? That's a broad statement to itself, where we are polarized and we want to pick sides and we want to point to that lines up with my ideology, because there's very few people I can get in a room from whatever background and say, no, I don't want this to be a safer city. No, I don't want running water, like what you said. Mm-hmm. But our current political landscape seems to want to push us, or certainly sets us up to fall into the trap of us versus them, and some of those ideologies that I'm reading between the lines of what you said. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's difficult, right? Because I think, you really have to look at each city's going to be different. Each community is going to be different. But I think you have to kind of get back to the idea of, what are the fundamentals we all believe in? And you're absolutely right. People want a safer city, right? Everybody should be able to walk downtown and feel safe. They should be able to, walk to the grocery store in their own community and feel safe. That's something that we need to focus a lot more on. When you think about affordability, I don't think that's a uniquely Calgary issue. I think a lot of jurisdictions across North America are going through that. But what's Calgary always been good at? We've been global leaders in many things. And so solving a bit of the affordability crisis is something I think is well in hand for us to do, and largely in part that comes through good policy making and enabling people to succeed, right? Move processes forward rather than throttle them off. And so if you think about housing, for instance, on average right now, if it's taking 8 years to put a building up, well, how is that helping our housing problem and how is that helping our affordability problem?
Mm.
Like you've got to be able to connect all the dots together if you want to move a city forward. And I feel like that's just not what we're seeing. Everything seems to be very one-off.
Hmm.
And, it's incumbent on on politicians that we put in those seats to say, I get this issue, but how does it relate to these other 10 things that we're also seeing at our city?
How does the mayor's office specifically, when you link of council as a whole, and we go to the polls, and we were just at the polls from a federal perspective, and
Mhm.
it becomes so much about this person versus that person. But it takes a team. Back to your point about leadership and running companies, the visionary leader has all the answers. That
Yeah.
doesn't do much if there isn't a team behind them that are aligned and want to move that forward. So when you think about just even your comment about, okay, it's taking 8 years, so if we bring buildings online faster, that creates more inventory, which allows people to get access to a place to live faster. And scarcity and just basic economics, if there's nothing available, well, accessibility and cost goes up. Accessibility
Yeah.
goes down, cost goes up. How does the mayor's office, as a standalone entity, because you vote and you look at it that way, but then the next day you've got to work with as a team to make those changes? How does that balance out when the rubber actually hits reality?
I don't think it's any different than most businesses go through, right? When you have an executive leadership team or a board of directors, it's incumbent on you to sort of think of what is the vision? What are we trying to achieve? What's our mission? What's our vision? What's our values? And put a strategic plan together that says, here's all of the things that we agree to, right? We all come from different walks of life. We all come from different backgrounds. And that largely in part is council, right?
Hmm.
But that's the best thing about council. It's about bringing those different perspectives to the table to say, how do we leverage those perspectives for a common issue that we have to solve so that we think more well-rounded about the issues that
Hmm.
we're trying to solve for. Um, but I don't think that's any different than anything I've gone through here at the Prostate Cancer Center, right? My job isn't to, you know, run the medical teams and do all the real work that we do here.
Hmm.
My job is to put the vision in place, right, and enable the team and build the team to make this place successful. And that's what we've done over the last 3.5 years here.
That's interesting. And yet you look at, I would just say, bureaucracy as a whole. Most people will roll their eyes and like, oh, we're going to get things done quickly, as if like, oh, we're going to cut the red tape. Come on, like we thrive on red tape. Sometimes an institution has a tendency to protect itself, which means more policies, more procedures, which seems counter to, and we'll talk
Mm.
about Calgary specifically, a very, what has been looked at, or Western Canada's entrepreneurial, quote unquote, my words, not yours, get shit done kind of province. Most of us in business look at government of any shape and go, oh, well, that's not the agenda over there.
Mhm.
When I see a lot of the platforms that you're running on, or some of the other candidates, as this all starts to unfold, a lot of those things lean a little bit into like, yeah, we're going to do it better. We're going to do it faster. We're going to, like kind of clear the path. But yet reality seems to not allow that to happen. This is a much broader question than this
Yeah.
specific race, but it seems to be plaguing us on a lot of fronts when those two things run contrary. Progress and process tend to bog each other. One bogs the other down.
I think it's about, driving a cultural shift, right? When we think about
Mm.
the city in particular, what is it? We're here to serve people, right? And I think we've gotten away from that. I think with our 26 lines of business, each and every day, we're here to provide a service to Calgarians. And that really comes back to ingraining that cultural mentality in all of our 21,000 employees, right? That's what we're here to do. And, it's no different than in the real world here. When I took on this job at the Prostate Cancer Center, healthcare's a mess, right? There's a lot of challenges that we see out there right now. But being a charity that's outside the system, for instance, one of the things we've been able to do here is consolidate all of our efforts into one place. So our doctors are here, radiology is here, our programming runs out of here, our nursing staff is here, our rapid access clinics are here. And the efficiency of putting this all together and building upon that has now led to a system where, if you come in with a high PSA diagnosis, for instance, within 2 weeks, you're into the clinic to see us. Within 2 weeks from that, you've seen a urologist. Within 2 weeks from that, you're out the door and on the path to wellness, and we've got you into a treatment program. And that's what we do here, right? When you largely in part think about the context of what I'm trying to say here is in a unified healthcare system, We have virtually got zero wait time for urology in southern Alberta now because of what we do here. In the northern half of the province, there's probably 1,400 guys confirmed with cancer who are waiting 9 to 12 months to see a urologist.
Oof.
We made that shift happen because of a cultural shift, because of a strategic plan that said we've got to do more. And as a charity, we've got to do more with less because I'm not AHS. I don't have a $24 billion a year budget, right? Every dollar I raise, we put towards patients here. Where that's important at the city story is that's how we've got to treat our tax dollars, because I think a lot of people feel like we pay way more today and we get way less service. And a lot of people will say, well, that's because we're growing. No, it's not. If we're growing, that means we're growing a tax base. And if we're not growing the tax base, it means because we haven't done it properly. We have not kept up with development, if that's the case, which is what we're seeing out there right now, which is evident in a housing and an affordability crisis.
Mm-hmm.
We're not keeping up with our investment in police, which is why we have 200 officers short. It's why we have the lowest officer to citizen ratio per capita in North America. It's why citizens don't feel safe, right? 40% of our roads have now fallen into disrepair, which means we're not going out there to surface level fix the road. We now have to dig them up and fix them. That's a big problem. Infrastructure wise, we're talking about water that isn't running. We still have fears out there in the community that we're going to be under water restrictions again this year. It's all of these things that you have to stop treating tax dollars like there's just more to take all the time. And you've got to create the efficiencies within them, stay in your lane, get back to core services, and focus on moving the city forward.
Those series of things that you just laid out, it's easy. And I like how you call this easy. Oh, big city problems. We've grown, what is it? An accordion bus full of people every day, roughly coming to Calgary. I heard that stat last week. I thought was, you can throw big numbers out, but you picture that bus unloading on your street and a lot of those people not with anywhere to go. You go, oh, wow. Okay. All right, I've got some empathy where that creates challenges.
Yep.
But I heard you also say this was maybe we lost sight of what was important. We were not prioritizing in the right areas. We've lost efficiency. So then it feels like these things can't be afforded, but there's a combination there. If I look at the last kind of 10 years or even the last 5 years, to your point about it's not a city that we recognize, is that we just lost sight of it? Is it poorly managed? And I want to be very careful, it's always easy to throw the person doing it now under the bus. And that's not what we're trying to do. But at the same time, I think everyone who lives in Calgary can relate to what you just said. We all experience water restrictions. I just got back from a week in Chicago. I think the second or the most dangerous city in North America. But I was downtown, and I felt safer in downtown Chicago than I can in downtown Calgary. And I was like, what is wrong with this picture? Like, where did that get tipped over? And I understand also there's parts of Chicago I didn't go to where maybe I wouldn't have had that same feeling, being such a 6 million person city plus.
Yeah.
Is that simply just it got ahead of us, or was it that, to your point, we got too focused on the bureaucracy and not enough on the kind of what is an Alberta get shit done kind of mindset?
I think it's a lot of things, right? Like, and you're absolutely right. You can't just say it was because of this and that person did it and wave your finger at them. I mean, it takes years to get to where we are. And like I say, the issues we're experiencing in Calgary are not uncommon across North America, right? Mm-hmm. Just about every major city is having problems with the opioid crisis, with public safety, and finding ways to create better infrastructure. For us, we know what the problem is. It's what are we going to do about it from here? And part of it is that we have to recognize it's not going to be an overnight fix. It has to be a strategy that we look at probably over the next 4 to 8 years. And so part of that is creating a starting point, right? A starting point that says, look, if we've got all of these tax dollars and we've got 100 different priorities and 50 of those priorities fall outside of really core services of the city, those are things that we need to drive better partnerships with to say, look, is it a private sector piece that they can support? Is it a provincial or federal piece that they can support? Are there partnerships we can create where maybe we can do some of those things, but it has to be together? All of these things have to come together in the repriority of what is the strategic plan going to look like for Calgary going forward over the next 4 years. I know I have said one thing out there, when I think about affordability, I've said, we're going to have a 0% tax increase every year. Right? I do not want to raise taxes. And there's a lot of even conservative people out there that are saying, well, I vote against every budget and I demand that we don't increase taxes. And now we're saying we're going to hold the line, and they think it's not discernible from magic, which makes me laugh. But it's not, right? Like it's
Is
about
there a point
looking.
where any technology or any idea through its evolution it could be perceived as magic at some point in the journey? There's a great quote that I'm not able to quote right now.
It's funny, right? Because it's where there's a will, there's a way, and where it boils down to me, it's again, let's focus on the things that are in our wheelhouse as a city. What are the services we need to develop and deploy to Calgarians each and every day? That's where our focus has to be. We've got to get out of the lane of things that the province should be doing, but they're not doing, so we're going to do, right? That's to
Mm,
me where partnership opens up the door. When we think about federal opportunities in terms of housing, how do we sell a better picture of what Calgary could be? How do we work with them in a different way to make sure that the investment comes back here and it isn't tied to blanket rezonings or other things, right?
mhm.
I think for me, it's about just making our money work for us instead of chasing the money to make, to keep living our lives the way we are right now.
You made a few references and, that 4 to 8 year, and if you're planning a city, arguably 4 to 8 years isn't enough time. You really have to, what is that longer term vision, knowing that things
Mhm.
might change and we have a world where things are rapidly changing. But when you talk
Yep.
about infrastructure, these aren't short term projects. These aren't small spends. These are big shifts. And, this is not a new thing to even bring up, but the short term we have from a 10-year perspective versus the time we're trying to talk about when we're building a city,
Mhm.
how do you make sure that those fundamentals that like, hey, we're going to put something in place now, but it's not really going to bear fruit for 5 or 6 years when we really see that vision? How tricky is that in politics in general, just to make sure that those kind of core themes that are playing the long game actually stay in place as you move through different leadership?
Well, it's playing out in real time with the Green Line, right?
Yeah,
I
yes, fair
mean,
enough. Yeah,
we're now well over 10 years into this project and have, no track laid on the
and
ground.
have nothing to show for it except a bunch of noise in the
And
media
and that's
and starts and stops. Right? It's actually pretty messy.
totally.
It's a pretty messy
It's
project.
it's hugely messy. And I think again, it's because we've lost sight of what's the vision, right? The vision
Yeah.
is how do we move people from one end of our city to the other? How do we get through the core? How do we become a more transit reliant city? Um, but you lose the vision in that, which means you lose the cost on it, which means you lose the partners on it, which means, and, right? We keep going down this
Well, you,
rabbit
you
hole.
you start fulfilling your own prophecy of like, this is going to have cost overruns, and then you
Hmm.
kind of it's funny. I fired up ChatGPT this morning and I said, what
Hmm.
specifically issues does Calgary have that aren't just big city issues? And I think the third one is transit and infrastructure gaps. Calgary is a sprawling city with car dependency, and the Green Line LRT is delayed and controversial. So
Hmm.
even ChatGPT was able to tell me that. Because I didn't want to fall victim of like, this is like, there's so many things that are happening on a global scale with cities and post COVID, and what are we actually dealing with here? That's maybe not, doesn't have to be unique, but we're still going to be able to solve it our way. So I was curious
Yeah.
what ChatGPT would throw at me.
Well, Greenline's an interesting one because I think Greenline is a good example of failure to have a partnership work,
Mm,
right? And what generally happens in any partnership is when you've got one party moving ahead with something and not informing the other party or bringing them along with the story, yeah, things fall apart, right? That's no different from what we're seeing on city council right now, where you
yeah.
have individuals just not working together and now refusing to work together. You have, a provincial government and a municipal government that are at odds on a project they should be working together on. And again, that doesn't happen overnight. That is a long-standing now piece where the city of Calgary, as lead on this, should have been bringing their partner along. To me, if we're going to build these things and we're going to plant our flag in the ground that says Calgary is a place that gets things done, we've got to start showing it. And yes, like we will have cost overrun conversations and we will have other things out there. But when we get to the common ground and we said, okay, now we've got a plan. And remember, the council I sat on, we put 17 recommendations in place so that literally this council could not screw this up. Where are those recommendations now, right?
Mm.
That's the whole point of, what we were talking about. The 10-year plan has to be a vision that everybody agrees to. And when you don't, and when you have sort of government swaying every 4 years, it's really hard to accomplish big things.
When you look at other cities for inspiration, and there's so many cities, and just being in Chicago is such a great example of a city. They hosted the World's Fair in 1895 when Calgary was maybe a series of huts or cabins along the river, just to put it into perspective. And you see the layers and the gentrification and the repurposing. And this building sat derelict for years, and now it's a top tier residence in downtown Chicago. And we're not the only ones that have gone through a transition and growth and not had downtown challenges like we had with kind of emptying out space. It's funny just being on this architectural boat tour, and like on 1920, there was like thousands of people that worked in this building, and then the Great Recession came and it sat empty for 30 years, and now it's top tier real estate in Chicago. Many cities have been through a version of what we're going through and have been around longer than us. Is there anywhere that you look out and go, hey, where can we get inspiration? Who can we talk to? Like, we're not the first ones to go through a version of what we're going through. Mm-hmm.
I think it's not even about talking to those other jurisdictions. It's about talking to the business leaders that have seen boom and bust cycle in our city repeatedly, right? I mean, you plan for it, right? You understand that when times are good, you've got to plan for the times that are bad, because the times that are bad will come eventually.
This too shall pass, as they say. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's okay, right? Because you have to look at it in terms of, what is that really long-term planning look like? How do we set a city up for the next 100 years? That's sort of the vision I'm coming into this with is, if we can reset where we need to be over the next 4 years, it's really going to build us into the future of where Calgary can go from here. And that comes with better money management now, focusing on our core infrastructure, focusing on core assets to make sure that we've laid the groundwork to continue to grow at the rate we are. If you think about it, 8 years from now, if we've continued to grow by 70,000 people each and every year, that bus load every day that's coming onto your street, without the proper infrastructure now, the problem just gets bigger and bigger every time one of those buses pulls in. Yeah. And so we've at some point got to stop here and say, okay, I know it's not sexy to talk about underground infrastructure and running water, but those are the fundamental.
It's really sexy when you don't have it.
Well, but those are the fundamental pieces of operating a good city. And if we want to be that place of opportunity, and we want to be that place that continues to attract global talent to Calgary, then we've got to set the basics up right to continue to attract those people here, right? Which means getting it right now.
We're talking about the 10-year, which I think there's no one listening that's not going to nod and agree. I think that's the nice thing about what you said is that, yes, we all agree. We want safety, we want affordability, we want access, we want inclusion, we want those things. Mm-hmm. If we go back 10 years ago, though, keep in mind the problems that we're having today were started 10 years ago. If the solutions we're going to have are 10 years out, mm-hmm. Has it changed or has it just amplified? Because of some of what's happened in North America with cities post-COVID and some of those challenges, I think we can point to a lot of cities are struggling. But 10 years ago, we didn't do things like that water main that broke is because maybe 5 years ago, we didn't repair it. Like, was it just not as exaggerated 10 years ago, but there were similar pieces in place? Or has it changed more than it's easy to always look back and go, oh yeah, but we were, romanticize a little bit of the past. But today's challenges are 10 years ago's failures, maybe, to be bold in saying that?
I think there's a couple things there. I mean, when it comes to water infrastructure, I think, in 2022, a lot of the water pipe maintenance budget was dropped from 10 million to 2 million. And I would say that council was probably not, the risk was not flagged as well as it probably should have been, let's say, right? But you're right, it is a long-term problem. And so you can't just sort of blame, the mayor wasn't standing out there with a sledgehammer trying to break up a pipe and cause a natural disaster here.
No, right? I don't think that's what was happening. No.
No, but when you go back to some of the problems that we're having now and that long-term problem, I think a lot of when you go 10 plus years ago, people didn't know how to manage the growth that we're going through. And I think a lot of cities have grown through, quite quickly, but we didn't anticipate, the immigration rules changing in countries to accelerate those things. And probably we weren't as a city at the table with some of those federal conversations to say, if we go and do this, are our cities ready to take on the brunt? Are they going to be able to ensure that people can have a high quality
trickle down policy effect, right?
Totally, right? Yeah. Can you have a high quality of life, knowing that we're going to open the floodgates, so to speak? And those conversations didn't happen. So what didn't happen then was planning practices didn't change. Our long-term city planning didn't change. I mean, we could have unlocked, twice as many new communities 5 years ago, and we'd probably be ahead of where we are now. We could have changed, this idea that buildings they're taking 8 years to go up right now. Well, if we could do that in 6 months, we would have been well ahead of the game now on affordability and housing.
Mhm.
So there's lots of things from a policy perspective we can do as a municipality to keep up with growth, but it takes having a partner at the federal level saying, our plan is to do this. Are you ready?
Yeah.
And if not, what do we need to do together to make you ready?
Back to your point about alignment and being at the table. No different than business. Like you leave the executive retreat and you've got all these plans, but you didn't include any of the people that are actually going to get the work done.
Exactly.
And 3 months later, everyone's frustrated because nothing got executed on. And you can
Yeah.
point to it. It seems to be more to usually get your hands around. Yeah, still 70,000 people a year on average. 10 years ago, what do you know? And if you don't know this number, that's fine. Did we have like what did we plan for? Was it 30? Was it 40? And now all of a sudden it's double. Just to put it into context.
Yeah, I don't remember the stats on that.
Yeah,
I mean,
I don't know.
I can remember the last sort of big boom was in 2007, around that time frame when
I
housing
remember.
prices just went crazy, right?
Yep.
And we're kind of back to that now. But, that was sort of a blip that kind of went up and then it leveled out a bit.
Mhm.
I think what we've been seeing over the last couple of years has been a bit shocking in a way, because I don't think anybody thought we'd sustain the level of growth that we're seeing right now, right?
When you see some of the forecasts, like where Calgary's going to be like 2030, it kind of melts your brain a little bit. You're like,
Yeah.
I moved here in 2000. I think it was maybe just shy of 800 or 798 or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
almost doubled in the last 25 years. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
that's a very, just factually, politics aside, that's a very real thing.
I remember even in 2018 standing before council and I said, look, like from an economic development perspective, we've got to be, ahead of the curve here. By 2030, we are going to be a city of 2 million people. 2 million people. Put that into perspective. Like, and for a lot of people that are born and raised here, like me, that's a lot of change in a relatively short period of time,
It is.
right?
It is.
So,
So I'm so curious. 2017 to 2021,
Mhm.
you were out, Jeff, but you came back in. Obviously, you left for reasons, which we won't get into the soul searching that probably went on to say, okay, I'm going to try different things, but you decided to come back in and decided to put your name in the hat. I'm curious kind of what some of the drivers were, just the personal side of, I bet there was lots of conversations around the kitchen table.
Yeah, there was. I mean, and predominantly the conversation that really led me here was the conversation around the kitchen table. When you look at a 16 and 13 and 9-year-old and you start to ask yourself, what's their future look like in Calgary? And at a point where I couldn't figure out what it looked like, I started to worry again, right? Because I think everything we're doing today to mitigate our city isn't really about us. It's about the future of the city. It's about the next generation that we're going to hand the city over to do good things with. And that was it for me, like understanding, having been in city council before and how it works and how how you need to make your tax dollars work better for you. I just felt like we've gotten away from that. I felt like we've gotten away from what is the vision of Calgary. Like if you asked a current city council member, what's the vision? I don't think anybody could tell you.
Hmm.
And to me, I want to make sure Calgary continues to be, the entrepreneurial hub of the world. I want to continue to make sure that young people have opportunity. Frankly, everybody has opportunity here in a safe and affordable city. But at the end of the day, the one thing I want to get back to be able to saying is I'm proud to be Calgarian. And I think a lot of us are just, the pride we used to have in our city isn't there anymore. And that's what made us different. Calgarians got involved in a much different way. And I can tell you, like, for 3.5 years, my job has been raise money for the Prostate Cancer Center and be the face of this. I can tell you, doing what I do in Calgary versus any other city in Canada, this place would not be as successful. We are successful because we have hundreds of volunteers that give back their time to support patients here. We are successful because we have the most philanthropic community in North America right here. That's why we're successful, right? Those folks help me create better patient outcomes each and every day. And they want to help at the city level. And they used to help at the city level. That's what we've got to get back to, right? When you have pride in your city, you have volunteerism happening, you have, all kinds of philanthropy happening, you have good things happening in your city. And it becomes the place where people want to be because they see that. And, maybe they're a little bit jealous of it from other jurisdictions. I hope they are. But that's why they should join us here.
Which I, as you know, I'm all in and incredibly optimistic about. I also have this very interesting little bubble I live in where I interview people that all they're doing is big things and changing and very positive. So you get rose-colored glasses on, and I choose to put those rose colors. We hosted our 500 event last week, which will be a couple weeks from now when this airs. And one of my team came in from Toronto. It's always interesting to get an outside perspective because I drink the Kool-Aid, right? I'm all in, I'm bought in, and I know we have challenges, but I'm in. And one of my team from Toronto came in and he sat in the room. We had about 220 people, and it was very optimistic and very positive. And yeah, we had a touch of reality, but it was more about where's our venture space going and how are we diversifying sectors. And it was all about forward. And the room was so like, it was a room full of pro Calgarians, pro Albertans, pro Western Canadians. Yeah. And our team member from Toronto, he said, I kind of got my eyes open a little bit. I was like, how's that, Mike? He goes, this event would not have happened in Toronto. He goes, it's just like, yeah, people are Toronto and they love Toronto and Toronto's the center of the universe. But the amount of like, we're in it together and it's positive and yes, we have challenges, but we're going to make it happen. It was really cool to get an outsider's perspective. And I chose to go all in on kind of taking that for what it was and not taking for granted, like, yes, we have challenges, and it's still I still wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
I completely agree with you. I mean, I think this is the best city in the world to be. And if it wasn't, I wouldn't be here raising my family, right? I think all of us have chosen this place as opportunity. I am incredibly optimistic that this is going to be the place to be, for the next foreseeable future. Are there short-term challenges? Yeah, absolutely. That's why we're going to put a 4-year plan together to fix that. That's why we're going to set the foundation to continue to grow, because there is literally no other place on earth I'd rather be.
I couldn't agree with you more. I want to spend a little bit of time off. Obviously, went through your website and Professional Creeper. Your website's very clearly laid out. But let's pick on a few things here. And the 0% tax increase for the next 4 years. It's easy to say. Is that realistic? And I know you believe it is, or you wouldn't have said it. But it's easy to go, is that a promise? Is that an election? Like, that sounds like a convenient thing to say, Jeff.
Yeah, look, I think over the last 10 years, a lot of people, each and every time we get down to setting the budget of the city, people fight this whole idea of like, why are we seeing another tax increase? And I've said, fine, let's not do that. I think we've got to do better with the money we have, right? I think we've got to get back to core services. We've got to focus on what is our line of businesses that we need to operate and provide better services to Calgarians. And we can do that on a 0% tax increase. I'm telling you right now, it's not impossible, and it doesn't mean dramatic cuts. It's a refocus of where our attention needs to be. And to me, setting up a 0% tax increase, it will provide the confidence and the trust that citizens need to have with City Hall again.
It's pretty easy to point at if you do or you don't. Like, it's one of those promises that doesn't, that's not what I meant. It's super clear, which I appreciate. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's super clear. It's super bold. It's just, I think we've got to do more with less. We've got to do better with the tax dollars that we take in. And again, I've done that for 3.5 years running a charity.
You're speaking from working the do a lot and I support a lot of not-for-profits. Oh, we'll just go out and get more money is rarely the answer.
It's rarely the answer. And I think that's what Calgarians have told me over the last year of just having conversations out there. It's too much. When I said the other day, we're going to get rid of the residential parking permit fees. And, people said, well, that's $1 million worth of revenue. And I said, well, it's also $1 million to operate. So if it's a make work job, why are we doing it? Because if affordability, you
got to look at the whole picture, which I do appreciate as well.
Right. And so go back to what I said about affordability. If affordability is our key, right? And I'll give you an example of 2 young people that I talked to in Mission, right? They're renting a place in Mission. They're trying to save enough money so they can buy a house somewhere, right? They want to get out of the rental cycle. They're considering moving back in with mom and dad now because that's what a lot of young people are going through.
To kind of get that period of time to get to build paper capital, right? Mm-hmm.
And let's remember, these are educated young people who have good paying jobs. Okay. These are not like sort of lost folks that are out there.
Yep.
The parking permit thing is one good example where, with the changes that City Hall made, they now have to spend $400 a month trying to get a parking permit because the building they live in doesn't have any parking. So they're not guaranteed a spot. And now, the $400 that they were saving to put down on a mortgage in the future is now going to parking. So yes, can they reduce, their one car? Sure. But to our point, Calgary's a driving city, right? And so just to get to work at those, high paying jobs that they've got or good quality paying jobs, they need a vehicle. So it's a catch-22. So I look at it and say, okay, what's the ground level problem we see here? It's affordability. Okay, what are we going to do to make life more affordable for people? And those are just 2 good examples of where I think we've got to do better.
And it's an easy thing to point out. I like you add the extra context of you got to look at the whole business case. It's $1 million in revenue, but if it's being run in a way that's your cost structure, then obviously you're just negatively impacting your citizens without actually positively impacting them on the back end, right?
Well,
Ultimately.
and
Yeah.
programs like that, let's remember why we started them. I mean, part of it was because
Mm.
businesses were saying, I want more flowing traffic in front of my business downtown. So we put parking restrictions in place to say, look, this is 30-minute parking, get in, get out type of thing, right? So we can cycle more people into those businesses. But if we've now got a problem where those business leaders downtown are saying, I can't afford to be in the core, nobody's coming back to work. It's too high cost. The taxes are too high. And now we need to move our small business to the suburbs. Well, do you really need the parking restrictions downtown for the same reason? Well, no, you don't. Right? So it's
Mm.
it's looking at the problem and providing adequate solutions for today, not just because this is the way we've always done it. Right? That's
Yeah.
not an
And
excuse to
and
me to
bringing
keep doing
policies
things.
in sometimes can be easier or a different journey than taking them out too, right? Mm.
Totally.
Yeah, the inertia is a real thing.
Yeah.
Blanket rezoning, this has been an
Yeah.
interesting one that I know just enough to say I don't know enough. Obviously, that seems like a very polarizing issue through the city.
Hmm.
It's been in place now for quite a while. Has it? Have you seen it? Has it moved the needle in terms of developments? And I live in Marteloup, South Calgary kind of area. This is not creating affordability. They're knocking down a 50s bungalow and putting in an
Yeah.
attached that's, I'm looking at one across from my house, that's a 1.5 million aside. That's not
Yeah.
increasing affordability for somebody who's looking to get into the housing market, right? Mhm.
Look, I am completely against the blanket rezoning. We will repeal that bylaw day one. But I'm not opposed to row housing where row housing makes sense, right? That's
Mhm.
what this is
Yep.
really about. But again, in this situation, let's go back to what is the foundational problem. The foundational problem was lack of housing stock, right? And an affordability problem.
Yep.
Building 4 houses at a time does not solve a housing stock issue. And it certainly, to your point, at $1.5 million a unit, does not solve an affordability crisis.
No.
To me, again, this is about bad planning practices that need to change. If an apartment building takes 8 years to go up, we need to do better. Because from an investor side, remember, they've got carrying costs and interest costs and tariffs now and
Mhm.
challenges with labor and all kinds of issues that, you know, make investors go, well, I'm not coming to Calgary anymore because it takes too long to get things done. To me, if we've got an affordability and a housing problem, we've got to be able to move the needle on these types of permits within 90 days. We have to be able to give investors the confidence that Calgary is going to do what they say they're going to do and get them moving faster, right? And part of that is going to come with new community growth, right? Like that is the one way we can keep up with growth. And you'll get a lot of sort of the ideologically driven people saying, well, growth is bad, sprawl is bad, but new communities do pay for themselves, right? Over
Right.
time, they have shown that it is the best way we can build housing stock at an affordable rate to put people, where they
It's
want to
kind of been
be.
Calgary's way too. It's kind of how it's evolved over the last kind of 30
It,
years, right?
it is, but it's a mix of doing things, right? It's about getting density right in the places where density makes sense.
Yeah.
You look at like Westbrook, right? You look at Westbrook Mall, right? And I always remember like the best tweet I ever saw was a guy who said, I know when the zombie apocalypse eventually happens, I'll fare better than most because I shop at the Westbrook Walmart, right? So just put into context now that area for a second.
Yep.
Look at the available landmass. Look at the fact that we now have the west leg of the LRT there. So let's pretend for a second that climate is your issue, transportation is your issue, housing is your issue, affordability is your issue. Okay, well, you now have an area of land, and this is my point with the Green Line as well. You now have areas where you can build density in advance of a train line going. In the case of Westbrook, you've got one of the busiest lines there, right there, ready to go. Build density where density makes sense. So I'm not saying we should just build new communities and urban
Yep.
sprawl should take over.
Yep.
I'm saying it's about a thoughtful mix of how we do things right and get it more from a timing perspective correct than anything else. And that's how you're going to keep up with affordability and housing stock.
Versus the blanket rezoning, which is not I don't want to use the word easy, but it's a blanket approach
Mhm.
versus actually being more deliberate and thinking through strategically that, yeah, no, we're not saying this or that, but we're going to be very deliberate about what we do, which often takes a little more thinking, a little more collaborate. Like it's harder in a way, but hopefully in the long run, being more strategic gives you a better outcome, literally just to play it out.
And to me, I mean, the process that we have in place under the area structure plans, under local area plans, just under the ways we look and evaluate whether or not a 4 unit row house makes sense on a lot, all of those things, the process was working, right? From a row housing perspective, people would say, well, it took too long to get it through council and it took too long. But by comparison, again, 8 years to build an apartment building, that's too long,
Yeah,
right? So
fair
we've
enough.
got to be more thoughtful about how we utilize density and how we're going to grow our city. And part of that might be, to me, I think it's about setting fair and consistent rules. I think removing the discretion that the planning department has had, where, these people can have parking, but these people can't. When we know the rule is you have to have parking, like one unit dedicated parking
Hmm.
stall for every unit built on a piece of property. Where and when you pick and choose to apply the rules has got to go away. What we need is consistency for the rules. And if you have that consistency, one of the things we need to look at as a city is how do you take technology? How do you create, AI application programs that help us do the primary evaluation faster so that we can get it into the sort of the human intervention stage of going,
Yep.
okay, it meets the criteria, it's checked the boxes, it matches our policy, move it forward, right? In a
Which is
much more efficient way.
Yeah, which is tricky. You got a 20,000 person organization. Change management. Technology is the thing that change management allows to happen, not the other way
Mhm.
around, kind of thing. And I get it. Those things are coming at us so fast. Whether you run a small business like I do, how are we
Yep.
going to innovate? What tool do we put in? How do we change process like that? That's overwhelming for every business. Add 21,000. I think you said 20. Is it city's 21,000 employees? That's a very real enterprise to create change in too. Like
But
just to respect it, right? Mm-hmm.
it was a very real change and challenge we had even here at the prostate cancer center, right? Like utilizing technology to make donor dollars go faster. That's an important thing for us because we have to be innovative, right? Like I say, we can't simply accept what we've done, always done is the way it is. That to me is
That's death, in my
it, it,
opinion.
it's
Yeah,
absolutely death,
yeah.
right? It is the case made for failure, right? We have to be innovative. We know we're an innovative city. We know we can get things done, and we know there's people who want to help. All of those have to come together to move this city forward in a different way.
Hmm. Your second one around public safety, I almost feels like it's not almost not necessary to talk about because we all want to have a safer city. We've all been downtown. We've all been in the
Mhm.
Beltline and seen kind of a little bit of the unfortunate trend that has happened in that area, especially since post
Yeah.
COVID. You made some comments earlier that were news to me in terms of the underrepresentation we have from a police perspective, like per capita of population. I didn't know
Mhm.
that. Those are some scary numbers. Like it's easy to go, oh, okay, if that's true, then I can understand why maybe this is happening now.
Yeah, I mean, and I think again, you get back to ideology. I think some of the challenge we've had is, our job as city council is to fund the budget for the police, right, and let them do their job. And I think you've seen a lot of intervention in terms of how police have wanted to do their job, but where they've been throttled off by governments.
Mm.
And that's a good example all the way across North America. I think what we've got to do though is sort of get aligned on what is the problem we face, right? When, working with the police chief, my number one thing will be to say, okay, here's my problem. It's not safe to walk on the streets downtown. I mean, last week, I'll tell you, I saw a construction worker just standing on the side of the road. I saw some guy just pick up a shovel and haul off and hit him. I have seen people shooting up in the plus 15s. I have seen all kinds of chaos and disorder on transit. That's my problem as a city. Chief, I need your job. I need you to help me solve the problem. So tell me
Mm.
what tools you need to fix the problem. Because I think we get into a lot of this idea of, well, I'm going to do this or I want to be seen doing that as a politician. But it really is a conversation about if we've identified it and we agree that we have a problem, what are the tools that I can help you with and find, put in place so that we solve that problem or at least start to move the needle on the problem. Then we can evaluate whether or not what we're doing is working and we need to do more of it or we need to go in a different direction again because what we're seeing just isn't turning out results, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
And also,
um,
you can't not ladder that problem up to, well, if you can't find a place to live and you can't find, access to services, does that increase the odds of you ending up on the street, which then increases your odds of being in a certain environment that creates certain behaviors? Like
yeah,
it is not as cut and dried as, I get it, just increasing policing. And at the end of the day, a citizen still we all need to feel safe, everyone
well,
included. And also there's other factors at play that all tie into running an effective city.
and here's where the partnership matters. When you look at the disorder, let's take downtown for instance, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you look at the police budget, $940 million this year compared to the healthcare budget for Alberta, which was $24.5 billion. Okay. When you look at the landscape of what's going on downtown, there's roughly, let's call it 3,000 individuals who are unhoused on the streets, right?
Okay. Is that the number? I didn't know
The
that. Mm-hmm.
vast majority of crime happening downtown is committed by, under 200 of those individuals. Okay. So the crime problem that we're seeing, that's my problem. That's the police's problem. That's what we've got to work on together to fix. The mental health and addiction side is something that we need a partnership with the Alberta government, right? They handle
Mm-hmm.
healthcare. I do know if they turned to me and said, Jeff, I'll give you $6 billion to handle the mental health and addiction side of Calgary, I would take it in a second, but they're not going to do that. So we need a better partnership to say, how do we do
Okay,
this together?
that's a good
Right?
example about whose role is which, and how does a partnership, where does it make sense and where does it not?
But it's also a funding problem, right?
Mm.
I can't solve mental health and addiction under the police budget. I can solve policing issues, I can solve public
Yep.
disorder issues, but I have to be able to partner to say, I need more money, I need more services. Because part of what we understand with mental health and addiction challenges is that sending an officer, a uniformed officer, into a problem isn't always going to create the best outcome. And so, how are we partnering police with some of the mental health and addiction workers to get people into recovery? How are we thinking about recovery from a different perspective and a different lens as healthcare in this province, right? I mean, we issue Narcan sometimes to five times a night to people. Are there other drugs? And we know there's other drugs that currently require consent, that if we could give them as an emergency drug, we could probably have a better conversation with individuals about getting into recovery. Because when you issue somebody Narcan, the first thing they want to do is they wake up angry. It's like you were dead 2 minutes ago. Now you're 100% adrenaline rush, if not more. You see officers in front of you or uniformed people. A lot of times it's firefighters. You want to get away, and all you want to do is get high again. So what do? You go back to the same dealer that just sold you the junk to begin with, right? That's the cycle we've got to break, right? But is that a policing problem? No, it requires
No,
more.
it's
It
more of a
requires
team. It's a
different
team
interventions,
approach. Yeah.
right?
Mm.
And that's where, my biggest challenge with a lot of things is trust
Mm.
gets broken because of failure to build partnerships. And when you have a city government that just wants to fight with everybody, are you fighting for us or are you fighting for you? Because it doesn't seem like you're fighting for me and solving my problem anymore.
In service of, right. If that's not what's the primary motive, then it creates a little bit of friction. But I do appreciate your comments on none of these problems are one dimensional, and there's many sides to the coin or to the Rubik's cube as we think about. And I've listened to some of the reports, listened to some podcasts on how do we increase the effectiveness of our police force by partnering them with someone who can handle the issue appropriately when they're there, and because police do what they do, and healthcare professionals might provide another angle, but how do you make sure they feel safe? And it's complicated, but yet it makes a lot of sense when you hear it kind of laid out. But I'm not minimizing that the reality of making that take place in the real world. It takes a lot of collaboration, and sometimes we're not good at that. We're not that good at collaborating these days. We're good at arguing.
We sure are.
When I get into the infrastructure piece, is that where you really start looking at the partnerships and where you really need to go, we're improving infrastructure and transportation and all the things, public transit in Calgary, but Calgary's in Alberta and there's a bigger game at play. I'm assuming that's where and I know that's what, the Green Line, some of the fiasco there was where the partnership kind of went sideways, or certainly the way the media portrayed it. I always want to be careful. You get a couple snippets and a couple headlines. You don't really know what's going on, but that seems where there's seems like a big candidate for a collaboration approach, or am I overgeneralizing it?
No, I think that's absolutely it. I think, from all levels, whether we're putting up a building transit infrastructure or underground infrastructure, I mean, we've got to look at how are we funding these things differently. And, you're right, for an aging city, we do give up about 33% of our property tax to the provincial government. Is that a conversation we need to have to say, look, I'm going to need more support on underground, right? I get that. As we always say, it's not the sexy thing, but running water is important to everybody, and we're going to need some help doing that, right? But maybe that's just different models to how we fund things and move them forward, right? And I think it's about giving your partner, whether it's a private sector partner or another order of government, the confidence that you're going to do what you said you're going to do, that you bring them along on the project to help them win too. Because as an investor in any project, everybody wants to win, right? Nobody puts money into housing in Calgary or transit in Calgary or the arena deal without saying,
everybody
I want to be at the table
story
to say, we did this together, right?
Yeah.
So, give people the win, show your work, and prove to both Calgarians and your partners that you can be trusted.
Do what you say. It sounds so simple when you say it out loud.
But it is, right? I mean, that's the thing. It's like, do what you say you're going to do. And if something changes, tell us, let us know. I'm okay with that too, right? I'm okay trying things. And if it didn't work, let's come back to the table and say, it didn't work. We tried. We thought it would. It didn't.
It's okay if you're late, but leave a note or call.
but that's the hard part about politics is nobody wants to do it because they're afraid of the repercussions in the public. And I think you just got to be honest with people, right?
Yeah.
Like,
no, the media is a real thing, or the sound bites, or I don't even want to blame the media as a blanket thing. We as consumers of that still can choose how we absorb that information that we see and get curious and question what we might be hearing. So Talk to me. It's, what are we now? We're May. We're middle of May. This will probably come out probably the beginning of June. October 20th, is that correct? October 20th, 25 is.
You got it.
How does your world just start to ramp up? Is it putting yourself out there in the media more? Is it having more of these types of conversations? Like, what is the short term and maybe the road ahead look like for you on this journey?
Yeah, I mean, I think getting the federal election out of the way, early this year was important, right? I think last time, we had a federal election on top of a municipal election, and I think a lot of Calgarians just felt frustrated, which is why you have a low voter turnout. I think you've got to give people a reason to get out and vote, and between sort of now and September long weekend, you're building your team, you're building your awareness, and you're prepped to really jump into the campaign September long weekend and
kind of when everyone's back from the sous chef kind of thing, or that when that July, August, and everyone gets into their desk after Labor Day and goes, oh geez, I'm behind on all the things I need to do. That's the business side of that story.
Exactly. But it's, I take it like this. I mean, when you think about municipal politics, I think people have literally 1 minute a week for it, right? And so what are we doing that captures that 1 minute a week? What are the things that we're doing to build general awareness? How do you get that plan out there? I mean, doing things like this is amazing. So thank you, because I think this is just how we share information, right? The world has changed. You can't rely on traditional media anymore, right? Mm-hmm. And, where we have an opportunity to get in front of a different audience and tell a bit of a story and say, look, like, I'm asking you to join me on building an affordable, safer city of opportunity. If you're with me, let's go do this together. If you're not, well, I'm sure you'll have other options, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just really what it comes down to in terms of campaigning.
How's the race shaping up right now? And I knew I was chatting with you, so this was my main focus, but has there many people put their name up, or when does that typically happen? Because I know you kind of put your name up a little bit, I think it was early, or certainly that's the way it was portrayed in the media. Is the race shaping up to be a fairly complicated field?
Yeah. I mean, I was first in market.
It like a sporting event.
No. It's, I was first in market because I knew back in October that, these challenges were not going to get fixed, and it was time for a different path forward for the city. I don't hate the mayor. I don't hate city council. I just think I have a different plan that's better for Calgarians. That's it, right? I mean, this isn't about, they're bad people. It's about, I just don't agree with their plan, and that's fine. We're allowed to have choices. Right?
I do. And I think that's about this. I hate this person. I hate that person. It's so easy and it's so indulgent. I don't like what they're doing. I don't like the outcome. I'm going to look at something different. I'm going to use my vote to make a voice. I think that's a much more healthy way. I hate this. I hate that. It sounds like we're in grade 5.
to me, it's about finishing your sentence, right? You have to be able to say, here's the problem, but here's what I'm going to do with it, right?
Yeah.
And so the landscape, I think between now and really September long weekend, you could see other people jump in the race. I suspect not. I think everybody who's in right now is sort of, who we understood was going to jump in the race. And what they're going to stand for. And some people are going to come and say, I'm part of a party. Some are not. I personally don't think Calgarians are ready for parties. I don't think they've sort of endorsed the party system at the municipal level, because I do think it's about, taking those unique voices that we have in our city, bringing them together, finding the common ground, and moving projects forward. I don't need a party to do that. I've got a 25-year career of doing that without a party. So I'm prepared to bring that skill set to the table and say, look, folks, we can work together here, and here's the vision. So
I do appreciate that, and for what it's worth, I tend to agree with you. I think we politicize too many things, where a pothole and unsafe walk downtown, and a building that takes 8 years, lack of affordability for what is going to continue to be a net new immigration into Alberta.
Yeah.
Those aren't political issues; those are human issues. Those are real issues that everyone who lives here or lives in any city, there's things we just expect, but they don't happen by accident. Someone needs to deliberately drive those initiatives forward.
Absolutely. Right. And that's what we need. Somebody who can just move the issues, get things done, and, help our city win. Right. Like I say, I have one single job in this election, and it's to make people successful. Right. I want to see every single Calgarian live the best life they can. That's it. It's not more complex than that.
I appreciate that, Jeff, and I'm with you on the all in on Calgary train for sure. I will sing those praises to anyone who listen, even if they won't. I'll do it anyways.
Yeah, me too.
Jeff Davison, YYC.com. You got your website up. Assuming that would be the best place for. It's very clear. It's very easy laid out. I spent some time going through it yesterday. Anywhere else that someone would want to hit up you or have a conversation? I'm assuming you're on LinkedIn, like most of us these days.
Oh yeah, all the social media platforms, which you tend to get a little bit overrun on, and so the website tends to be the best. But look, again, if you want an affordable, safe city of opportunity for everybody, join us, right? Like it takes a movement to happen to win an election. And so if people can give their time, if they can give their dollars, if they can just give us some feedback, all of those things are incredibly important to how we shape the city going forward. And we're asking Calgarians for their help.
I appreciate that. Jeff, thanks for coming on. Thanks for taking the time. I appreciate you sharing, and I'm always in a place of learning, and it's so easy to get wrapped up in your busy life, but like, I'm annoyed at this, I'm annoyed at that, and taking that extra step and go, well, let's learn a little bit more. Let's understand the perspective. And yes, these are real challenges, but hope is a real commodity, and a little bit of hope that the future will be better than the past. I think that we all want to wake up with that on our minds. Mm-hmm.
Well, and thank you for having me on. This is amazing, and congratulations on over 500 episodes.
Thank you. It's been a journey. I would continue to do it if nobody listened, just so I could have conversations like this. That's my people are like, how'd you stick with it? I'm like, I enjoy every conversation I have. That's the secret to it.
Yeah.
Jeff, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.